Hi guys and welcome to History for Calm Nights. Tonight we step softly into a half-lit street somewhere in 19th century Britain, where dawn is not yet golden but grey and hesitant, like a breath held between dreams and duty. You feel the chill first. It settles on your cheeks and seeps through your boots as though the cobblestones themselves remember colder centuries. Around you the town still sleeps in uneven rhythms. A shutter bangs gently. A horse shifts its weight with a tired sigh. Somewhere far off a bell tests its voice against the silence. You pause and realize that in this world you probably would not survive long without learning quickly how to endure routine discomforts with quiet determination. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, let me know where you are listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. There is something comforting about imagining us all connected by the same slow unfolding of history. Now, dim the lights. You begin walking not because you're late, but because standing still in this hour feels almost like breaking a rule. The street curves gently past rows of brick houses whose windows show no sign of life yet. A thin veil of smoke hangs in the air, drifting from chimneys that have been coaxed awake by early risers. The smell is faintly sweet, faintly bitter, a mixture of coal and damp wood. It settles on your tongue in a way that modern mornings rarely do. A widely accepted historical observation comes quietly to mind. In many British towns during this period, industrial expansion transforms the landscape so gradually that people hardly notice change from one year to the next. You sense this subtle transformation beneath your feet as though the ground itself hums with future possibilities. A figure emerges from a doorway ahead of you, wrapped in a shawl that seems too thin for the cold. She carries a small bucket and moves with practiced efficiency toward a public pump at the corner. You follow at a respectful distance, aware that you are witnessing the first steps in a daily ritual repeated thousands of times across the country. The pump handle creaks. Water splashes into metal. Steam rises from her breath. You think about how easily you might take running taps for granted in your own time. Here, even the simplest comfort requires effort, measured in muscle and patience. The sky brightens almost imperceptibly. At first you notice only that shapes gain definition. Then colours begin to reveal themselves in muted shades of brown and soot-tinged red. The town does not wake all at once. Instead, it stirs like a sleeper adjusting blankets one movement at a time. A door opens. A cough echoes. Footsteps multiply. You find yourself walking beside a man carrying a bundle of tools wrapped in cloth. He nods without speaking, acknowledging your presence as naturally as he accepts the coming day. There is no dramatic urgency in his pace. Life here unfolds through steady repetition rather than sudden bursts of excitement. A quirky detail from this era slips into your thoughts. Some workers believe that beginning the morning with a particular song or rhyme might bring luck, so you listen carefully for fragments of melody drifting through the streets. Sure enough, a faint tune rises from somewhere behind a row of houses. It wavers in the cold air, uncertain yet determined like the first light itself. You smile at the idea that even in times of hardship, people carry small rituals to make existence feel more manageable. As you continue, the town's edges begin to reveal themselves. Narrow lanes stretch toward fields that are still wrapped in mist. Beyond them, darker shapes hint at factory buildings waiting to claim the day's labour. You feel a quiet tension gathering in the atmosphere. It is not fear exactly, more like anticipation shaped by necessity. Historians still argue whether ordinary people in these communities view industrial change primarily as opportunity or intrusion. Walking here now, you sense how both interpretations might be true at once. The promise of wages and progress stands beside the reality of longer hours and harsher environments. Your boots crunch softly over scattered gravel. A cart rattles past, pulled by a horse whose coat gleams faintly with dew. The driver glances at you with a mixture of curiosity and indifference, as though Strangers are both common and irrelevant in the flow of daily life. You wonder what stories he might carry. Perhaps he transports goods from countryside farms. Perhaps he delivers coal destined to warm hearths that will never quite banish the damp. Every small action here contributes to a vast network of survival, a choreography of effort that rarely pauses long enough for reflection. The first true sunlight finally reaches the upper windows of a tall building. It does not blaze triumphantly. Instead, it spreads like diluted honey touching brick and glass with gentle insistence. You stop for a moment to watch how the light changes the mood of the street. Shadows retreat, details sharpen, even the sounds grow clearer, forming a layered symphony of footsteps, distant machinery, and murmured greetings. You feel both participant and observer caught between curiosity and the sleepy comfort of simply drifting along. Children appear at last emerging from doorways with scarves tied hastily around their necks. Their laughter breaks the solemn rhythm of adult routines. One boy runs ahead, skidding slightly on damp stones before regaining his balance with a grin that suggests such mishaps are part of the morning's expected adventure. You realize that for them, this environment holds not only challenges but also possibilities. Games invent themselves from scraps of time. Friendships form in the spaces between responsibilities. The future, though uncertain, feels as wide as the pale sky above. You walk on aware that this slow awakening will soon give way to the full demands of the day. Yet there is something profoundly soothing about witnessing life before it gathers speed. In this fragile hour, ordinary existence reveals its quiet dignity. People move not with grand ambition, but with steady resolve. Each gesture, from lighting a fire to lifting a bucket, carries meaning shaped by a necessity and hope. You sense that understanding this rhythm might be the key to understanding the century itself. The bell you heard earlier now rings more confidently, marking the moment when hesitation ends and obligation begins. You feel the sound resonate through your chest like a gentle command. Around you, the town responds in subtle ways. Doors close behind departing workers. Smoke thickens as hearths are fed. Voices grow firmer. Dawn has completed its patient work. The stage is set for another day that will seem ordinary while quietly shaping history. You take a final glance down the misty lane, letting the image settle into memory. Then you follow the flow of footsteps toward whatever comes next, carrying with you the awareness that even the simplest morning can hold layers of story waiting to be discovered. The warmth reaches you before the doorway fully opens. It drifts outward in a soft wave scented with smoke, porridge, and damp wool slowly drying by the fire. You step inside without ceremony, as though you have always belonged to this small circle of morning ritual. The room is low-ceilinged and dim-lit mainly by the flickering confidence of a hearth that has already been coaxed into life. A kettle hums quietly. Wooden spoons clink against rough bowls. You sense immediately that breakfast here is not a leisurely indulgence, but a practical anchor for the hours ahead. You find a place near the wall where the heat gathers most kindly. Your hands extend toward it almost on instinct. The sensation of thawing fingers feels oddly luxurious. A familiar historical reality settles into your thoughts. For many ordinary households in 19th century Britain, the hearth serves as both kitchen and gathering point, shaping daily rhythms around its dependable glow. Without central heating or electric convenience, this single source of warmth becomes the heart of domestic existence. You watch how everyone instinctively orbits it like planets drawn by quiet gravity. A woman with flour-dusted sleeves stirs a pot suspended above the flames. Her movements are steady and economical. She does not rush yet. Nothing about her. Her manner suggests idleness. Steam curls upward, carrying a smell that is both plain and comforting. Oat's milk, perhaps a pinch of salt. The simplicity of it makes you aware of how easily modern tastes forget the satisfaction of food that exists mainly to sustain. You take a wooden bowl when it's offered. The porridge is thick and warm, settling in your stomach like reassurance. Outside, the chill still lingers, but here you feel briefly shielded from its persistence. Across the table, a man mends a tear in his sleeve with surprising delicacy. The needle flashes in the firelight as though marking time. He speaks little, yet his presence communicates an entire language of shared responsibility. You begin to understand how conversation during such mornings often consists of glances, gestures, and the quiet passing of objects from one hand to another. Words would almost feel excessive. A curious tidbit from this era drifts into your awareness. Some families believe that leaving a crumb of bread near the hearth might invite good fortune or ward off mischief from unseen spirits. You notice a small crust tucked discreetly beside the stone. Whether the practice springs from superstition or simple habit, it adds another layer to the ritual unfolding around you. The first true daylight seeps through a narrow window, illuminating floating particles of ash like tiny constellations. You watch them drift and vanish, thinking about how each morning must resemble the last and yet never repeat exactly. Historians still argue whether such repetitive routines bring comfort or quiet frustration to those who live within them. Sitting here now, you sense how both feelings might coexist. There is security in knowing what the day requires. There is also a subtle yearning for something different, something not yet defined. A child enters carrying a small bundle of kindling. Her cheeks are flushed with cold. She places the sticks beside the hearth with solemn pride. You catch her eye and offer a smile. She returns it cautiously, as though measuring whether you belong in this intimate space. Then she joins the others at the table, dipping her spoon into porridge with an eagerness that transforms necessity into pleasure. You realize that hunger sharpens appreciation in ways abundance rarely does. The room grows busier as the minutes pass. Boots are pulled on, scarves are wrapped. A loaf of dark bread is sliced with firm, decisive strokes. Butter is spread sparingly, each portion carefully judged. You listen to the sounds of preparation, noticing how they form a quiet music of purpose. The scrape of chair legs across stone, the creak of leather straps being fastened, the low murmur of plans exchanged in half sentences. Every action contributes to the shared intention of stepping beyond the threshold and facing whatever awaits. You glance toward the hearth, again drawn by its steady light. It feels almost alive, breathing in fuel and exhaling warmth. A widely recognized historical detail comes gently to mind. In many working homes, maintaining the fire is considered a skill passed from one generation to the next, an art of timing and observation. Too little fuel and the room chills quickly. Too much and precious resources are wasted. You watch as the woman adjusts a log with careful precision, her expression focused yet serene. This, you realize, is expertise shaped by necessity rather than formal recognition. Someone pours tea into the chipped cups. The liquid is strong and slightly bitter, softened by a splash of milk. You take a sip and feel alertness spreading through your senses. Outside, faint noises hint that the wider world has begun its own morning rituals. A cart rolling past, distant voices rising in greeting or complaint. The house seems to hover between two states, still sheltered yet already leaning toward departure. A brief conversation unfolds about the weather. Will the fog lift? Will rain arrive by afternoon? Such questions carry more weight here than casual small talk in another century. The success of work travel, even her health, may depend on answers no one can fully predict. You sense how people learn to read clouds and wind with an attentiveness that feels almost instinctive. Their awareness of the natural world is not romantic but practical, shaped by the constant negotiation between comfort and survival. The meal ends not with ceremony but with a gradual shift in posture. Bowls are emptied, hands are wiped on aprons or sleeves, chairs are pushed back. The transition from rest to action feels inevitable, like the turning of a tide. You stand as well reluctant to leave the hearth's embrace, yet curious about what lies beyond. Someone hands you a small piece of bread wrapped in cloth, a gesture of kindness that acknowledges both your presence and the journey ahead. As the door opens, cool air rushes in to replace the warmth you have come to appreciate. You take one last look at the glowing coals imprinting their colour and quiet promise in your mind. Then you step outside, joining the steady procession of ordinary lives, moving toward another day that will pass almost unnoticed while shaping the story of an entire age. The air feels sharper now that you have left the shelter of the hearth behind. It brushes against your face with a damp insistence that reminds you this morning is not yet fully awake. A pale fog drifts through the lanes like a hesitant visitor, softening edges and muting colours until the world appears sketched rather than solid. You pull your coat closer, aware that countless others around you perform the same small gesture without thinking. Walking becomes the day's first shared language. Your boots find a steady rhythm on the worn stones. Ahead, the narrow street bends toward a wider road where figures already gather in loose currents of movement. Some walk alone, shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. Others travel in pairs, exchanging quiet remarks that seem to vanish almost as soon as they are spoken. You sense a peculiar mixture of determination and resignation in their pace. A commonly accepted historical insight rises in your thoughts. For many workers in 19th century Britain, the daily journey on foot to mills' docks or workshops forms an essential part of existence, shaping not only schedules but also social bonds and physical endurance. The fog thickens, briefly wrapping the scene in a muted hush. Sounds reach you in softened fragments, a distant cough, the rattle of wheels, the faint cry of a street vendor already preparing to trade. You wonder how many miles these people travel each week, how their bodies learn to measure distance not by maps, but by muscle memory. The path beneath your feet feels familiar, even though you have never walked it before. Such is the quiet power of repetition. A young woman strides past, carrying a basket balanced against her hip. Her expression is focused, almost serene. You notice how she navigates puddles and uneven stones with practiced grace. A curious tidbit from this era drifts into your mind. Some urban workers develop nicknames for particular stretches of road, turning ordinary routes into landmarks of shared experience. A sharp bend might be called the Devil's Elbow. A muddy patch might earn a reputation as the boot thief. You imagine conversation shaped by such playful labels, a way of easing the monotony of daily travel. Gradually the fog begins to lift, revealing rooftops slick with dew and chimneys exhaling thin ribbons of smoke. The road widens into a thoroughfare alive with purposeful motion. Horses clop steadily, their breath rising in pale clouds. A boy darts between carts with an agility born of necessity rather than mischief. You feel yourself drawn into this living current, carried forward by momentum as much as intention. Walking here is not merely transportation. It is participation in a collective rhythm that defines the town's waking hours. Historians still argue whether these shared journeys foster a sense of solidarity among workers or reinforce invisible hierarchies that shape social identity. As you observe the subtle differences in clothing posture and pace, you begin to understand how both interpretations might hold truth. A man in a neatly brushed coat keeps to the edge of the crowd, his gaze fixed ahead. Nearby, two labourers laugh quietly over some private joke, their easy camaraderie forming a small island of warmth in the cool morning air. Every step seems to tell a story about belonging, or striving, about endurance or quiet ambition. You pass a row of shops whose shutters are only now being unlatched. The smell of fresh bread drifts outward, mingling with the sharper scent of coal smoke. It reaches you like an invitation. For a moment you consider pausing, letting the comfort of warm food delay the demands of the day. Yet the flow of footsteps continues, urging you onward. You realize how easily individual desires are folded into the larger necessity of keeping time with the world around you. A bell rings somewhere ahead, its tone clear and insistent. The sound travels through the thinning fog, guiding movement as effectively as any visible sign. You watch how people adjust their pace, almost unconsciously lengthening strides or quickening breath. Time here is measured not by glowing screens or silent watches, but by audible cues that ripple through shared space. The bell becomes both warning and reassurance, reminding everyone that routine provides structure even when circumstances remain uncertain. As you approach the edge of town, the landscape opens slightly. Low fields stretch beyond the last rows of houses, their surfaces silvered with moisture. A line of factory buildings rises in the distance, dark silhouettes against the growing light. You feel a subtle tightening in your chest. This is where the quiet of morning gives way to the clamour of industry. Yet for now, the journey itself retains a kind of fragile calm. Your footsteps crunch softly on gravel. A bird calls from a hedgerow. The world seems to hover in a moment between stillness and noise. You fall into step beside an older man whose gait suggests years of repetition. He glances at you briefly, offering a nod that feels both courteous and distant. Without speaking, you share the path for several minutes. You notice how his breathing settles into a steady pattern, how his eyes scan the road ahead with practiced familiarity. There is wisdom in such unremarkable details. Lives are shaped here not by dramatic events but by the accumulation of mornings like this one. A widely noted historical fact slips into your awareness. Improvements in urban infrastructure during the 19th century gradually shortened some commutes, yet many workers continue to rely on their own feet as the most dependable means of travel. You sense the resilience required to meet each day's demands without complaint. Walking becomes a quiet act of perseverance, a testament to the human ability to adapt. The sun finally pierces the remaining fog, scattering golden light across the damp road. Shadows stretch and shrink as clouds drift overhead. You feel warmth touch your face, faint yet encouraging. Around you, the crowd begins to thin as individuals branch off towards separate destinations. The shared journey dissolves into countless private routines. For a moment, you linger, aware that you have witnessed something both ordinary and profound. You take a deep breath, tasting coal smoke and morning freshness in equal measure. Then you continue forward, drawn toward the distant hum of machinery and the promise of stories still unfolding along the road. The sound reaches you before the building fully appears. It begins as a faint trembling in the air, like distant thunder that refuses to fade. Then, as you draw closer, it resolves into a constant mechanical rhythm that seems to pulse through the ground itself. The textile mill rises from the morning haze with a stern kind of inevitability. Tall windows catch the light in narrow bands. A chimney exhales dark smoke that drifts sideways in the wind, leaving a lingering taste of soot at the back of your throat. You pause at the entrance, watching workers stream inside in steady succession. Their expressions are neither cheerful nor defeated. Instead, you notice a practiced composure, as though each person has learned to leave certain thoughts at the threshold. You follow, carried along by the flow. Inside, the noise grows immense. It surrounds you from all sides, an unbroken cascade of clattering looms, humming belts, and the restless whisper of fibres in motion. Conversation becomes impossible. Even your own breathing feels quieter than usual, swallowed by the industrial roar. A broadly recognised historical point settles into your awareness. Textile production stands at the heart of Britain's industrial growth during this century, transforming both rural economies and urban landscapes with remarkable speed. You feel the scale of that transformation in the vibration beneath your boots. Machines stretch in long rows, their metal frames glinting in the pale light. Workers move among them with focused precision, tending threads that must not tangle, adjusting wheels that must not falter. The scene feels both mesmerizing and relentless. You step closer to a loom, where a young woman guides fabric through a sequence of movements that seem almost choreographed. Her hands are swift but careful. Every gesture carries the weight of experience gained through repetition. She glances at you briefly, offering a small nod, before returning her attention to the task. There is pride in that nod. Not boastful pride, but the quiet satisfaction of competence earned through endurance. A curious anecdote from this world drifts through your thoughts. Some mill workers develop their own signals to communicate across the deafening noise, inventing gestures or tapping patterns on wooden beams to share warnings or encouragement. You watch closely and notice two men exchanging quick motions of the hand, a silent language shaped by necessity. It feels like witnessing a secret conversation carried on in plain sight. The air inside the mill holds a peculiar texture. Fine particles float like invisible snow, catching in your throat and clinging to your sleeves. You realize how constant exposure to such conditions might shape both health and resilience. Scholars still debate whether early industrial workplaces foster a sense of collective identity among labourers or deepen feelings of isolation beneath the machinery's unyielding rhythm. Observing the room now, you sense how the individuals find ways to belong, even in environments that seem designed to erase personal distinction. Light filters through high windows in narrow shafts, illuminating sections of moving fabric with almost theatrical effect. The contrast between brightness and shadow adds to the hypnotic quality of the scene. You feel time stretching and compressing in unpredictable ways. Minutes slip past unnoticed while tasks repeat in familiar cycles. The absence of clear markers makes you rely on instinct rather than clocks to gauge the passage of hours. You notice a supervisor walking slowly along the central aisle, his gaze attentive to details others might overlook. He pauses, occasionally offering brief instructions or a word of acknowledgement. The dynamic between authority and cooperation unfolds in subtle exchanges rather than dramatic confrontations. A widely acknowledged observation comes gently to mind. Industrial discipline during this period often depends as much on mutual expectation as on formal rules, creating a complex balance between control and shared responsibility. Near the far wall, a boy stands on a wooden crate to reach the upper mechanisms of a spinning frame. His small hands move with astonishing confidence. You feel a pang of concern, yet also an admiration for his determination. Childhood here seems intertwined with work in ways that blur modern boundaries between learning and labour. The boy catches your glance and grins, revealing a resilience that feels both inspiring and unsettling. The mechanical chorus continues without pause. You begin to notice patterns within the noise, subtle variations in pitch that signal changes in speed or tension. Workers respond instinctively, adjusting movements before problems can grow. It is as though the entire room participates in a shared conversation conducted through vibration and rhythm. You wonder how long it takes to develop such awareness. How many days and nights of repetition shape this almost intuitive skill? A bell rings faintly from somewhere beyond the walls, its tone barely audible above the machinery. Yet you see heads turn, shoulders shift. The knowledge that a break approaches travels faster than sound itself. Anticipation forbixes in small gestures. Someone wipes their brow with a sleeve. Another stretches cramped fingers with a quiet sigh. These tiny signals reveal how endurance is sustained not only by strength but by the promise of brief relief. As you move toward the doorway, the contrast between interior clamour and exterior stillness feels almost surreal. Stepping outside, you are struck by how suddenly the world seems spacious again. The sky appears wider. The air tastes cleaner despite the lingering smoke. For a moment you simply stand, letting your senses recalibrate. Behind you the mill continues its steady roar, a reminder that progress often arrives wrapped in complexity. You take a slow breath and follow the path that leads away from the building. The morning has matured into full daylight. Shadows shorten. Voices carry more clearly across open ground. You sense that the experiences gathered within those walls will linger in your thoughts, shaping how you understand the ordinary passage of time in an age defined by change. You follow a quieter street now, one that curves gently away from the mill and toward rows of larger houses set behind modest iron gates. The atmosphere changes almost immediately. The air still carries the faint trace of coal smoke, yet it mingles here with softer scents of soap baking bread and damp earth from carefully tended gardens. Gravel crunches beneath your boots with a sound that feels more deliberate, as though even the ground has been arranged to signal order and respectability. A door opens before you reach the first gate. A young maid steps out carrying a small rug which she begins to shake with brisk determination. Dust swirls in the pale sunlight like a fleeting storm. She pauses to catch her breath, then notices you and offers a polite nod. Her apron is neatly tied. Her sleeves are rolled to reveal forearms already reddened by morning chores. You sense both fatigue and quiet pride in her posture. A well-established historical reality comes gently to mind. Domestic service employs a vast number of working women in 19th century Britain, providing both livelihood and a strict social structure that shapes daily behaviour. You step through the gate and into a courtyard where the rhythm of household labour unfolds in subtle layers. A cook leans over a kitchen table kneading dough with steady pressure. A footman polishes brass fittings until they gleam like small suns. Somewhere above floorboards creak as someone moves quickly from room to room. The house itself seems alive with purpose. Each task contributes to an invisible choreography designed to maintain comfort for those who reside here, and dignity for those who serve. A curious fragment of social custom drifts into your thoughts. Some servants develop discreet methods of communicating news within a household by adjusting the placement of everyday objects, a folded napkin signalling urgency or a slightly open window, hinting at unexpected visitors. You begin to notice how small details might carry hidden meanings. A teacup placed just so, a curtain drawn at an unusual angle. The domestic world reveals its own language spoken without words. The maid you met earlier now scrubs stone steps with water drawn from a bucket that glints in the light. Her movements are precise and methodical. She hums softly, perhaps to steady her pace or to keep loneliness at bay. Scholars still debate whether service in such homes offers genuine opportunity for advancement or simply reinforces rigid class divisions that are difficult to escape. Watching her work, you feel the complexity of that question settle quietly in your mind. There is skill here and resilience. There is also a constant awareness of boundaries that must not be crossed. You're invited into the kitchen, where warmth wraps around you like a familiar shawl. Pots simmer on the range. The smell of onions and herbs rises in comforting waves. A cat dozes near the hearth, its tail flicking occasionally as though dreaming of more adventurous pursuits. The cook glances up and gestures for you to sit at a narrow wooden bench. She offers a slice of bread still warm from the oven. You accept with gratitude, savouring how such simple generosity can transform an unfamiliar place into something briefly welcoming. Beyond the kitchen door, you glimpse a hallway lined with polished surfaces and framed portraits. Voices drift from an upstairs room measured and confident. The contrast between the visible labour below and the composed leisure above feels almost tangible. A widely acknowledged observation surfaces in your thoughts. Victorian households often rely on an intricate hierarchy of roles, each defined by expectations that shape everything from posture to speech. You sense how individuals navigate this structure with careful awareness, balancing personal identity against the demands of duty. A bell rings sharply, cutting through the kitchen's warmth. Instantly, the cook straightens. The maid wipes her hands and moves toward the corridor. You follow at a respectful distance, curious to witness how quickly the atmosphere shifts from relaxed to attentive. Instructions are given in calm tones. A tray is prepared with cups arranged in perfect symmetry. The ritual of service unfolds with an elegance that seems both practiced and inevitable. Outside sunlight spreads across the garden in thin golden bands. You step onto the gravel path again, noticing how birdsong fills the pauses left by human activity. The world beyond the gates continues its own steady progression. Carriages pass, vendors call. Yet within these walls, time appears to move according to a different measure, one shaped by etiquette as much as necessity. You linger for a moment near the gate, reflecting on what you've seen. Domestic life here is not merely a backdrop to grand historical events. It is a stage upon which countless small decisions and gestures shape the texture of everyday existence. You realise that understanding this quieter sphere brings you closer to the lived experience of an entire century. With a final glance at the tidy courtyard and the figures moving purposefully within it, you turn back toward the street. The day continues to unfold around you, inviting further exploration of how ordinary lives pass their hours, in ways both familiar and surprisingly intricate. You leave the ordered hush of the courtyard and return to the wider street where the day has now gathered a fuller voice. Wheels roll over stone with more confidence. Conversations drift in fragments that mingle with the distant hum of industry. Yet before long you find yourself drawn toward a different kind of building, one that stands slightly apart from shops and homes. Its tall windows reflect the pale sky. A modest sign by the gate suggests its purpose without flourish. This is a schoolroom, a place where the future is shaped through ink-stained fingers and patient repetition. You step inside and are greeted by a house that is instantly distinctive. Chalk dust-worn wood-damp coats hung in a row. It feels both austere and oddly comforting. Rows of narrow desks face a blackboard whose surface carries faint ghostly marks from earlier lessons. A familiar historical understanding settles into your thoughts. Compulsory education laws begin to expand across Britain during this century, gradually drawing more children into formal learning environments that promise literacy and social discipline. The pupils enter in small clusters, their boots tapping softly against the floor. Some whisper, others sit with solemn determination clutching slates and worn exercise books. You take a seat at the back, observing how the room fills with restless energy that must soon be shaped into order. A teacher arrives with measured steps, his presence alone enough to quiet the growing murmur. He nods once, then begins the morning with a recitation that the children repeat in careful unison. Their voices blend into a fragile chorus, earnest and slightly uneven. A curious detail from the era drifts through your awareness. In certain schools, students are encouraged to memorize long passages of moral instruction alongside arithmetic and spelling, reflecting a belief that education should guide character as well as intellect. You watch as one girl struggles to pronounce a difficult word, her brow furrowed in concentration. The teacher pauses beside her desk, offering gentle correction rather than stern reproach. In that brief exchange, you sense both the weight of expectation and the quiet possibility of growth. Light slants through the windows, illuminating drifting motes of dust that seem to hover in thoughtful silence. Outside, a cart rattles past, reminding you that the world beyond these walls continues its busy course. Inside, time takes on a different texture. Minutes stretch as pupils trace letters again and again, their hands learning the shape of language through repetition. You remember how easily modern life forgets the patience required to master such basic skills. Scholars still debate whether the expansion of schooling during this period truly offers equal opportunity or simply reinforces existing social boundaries by preparing children for roles already defined by class. Watching the lesson unfold, you feel the tension between aspiration and limitation. A boy near the window gazes outward for a moment, distracted by the movement of clouds. The teacher gently calls him back to the present. Dreams must wait. Practice comes first. The scrape of chalk on slate creates a soft, rhythmic accompaniment to the lesson. You notice how some pupils develop their own strategies to endure the long hours. One hums quietly beneath her breath. Another taps his foot in time with an imaginary tune. These small acts of self-comfort transform discipline into something more manageable. A widely recognized fact emerges in your thoughts. Classrooms in this century often rely on strict routines to maintain order, among large groups of students shaping both behavior and expectations for years to come. At midday, the atmosphere shifts almost imperceptibly. Shoulders relax, pens are set aside. A break is announced and the room fills with the sudden brightness of laughter. Children spill into the yard, chasing one another across packed earth. You follow more slowly, savouring the contrast between indoor restraint and outdoor exuberance. The air tastes fresher here, carrying hints of grass and distant cooking fires. A girl offers you a piece of apple from her pocket, its sweetness a reminder that even modest treats can feel like celebration. Returning inside, you notice how sunlight has moved across the floor, marking the quiet passage of time. The afternoon lesson begins with reading aloud. Voices rise and fall in hesitant cadence. You find yourself drawn into the rhythm, almost lulled by its steady persistence. Learning here is not dramatic. It unfolds through countless small efforts that accumulate like grain of sand shaping a shoreline. As the final bell rings, pupils gather their belongings with a mixture of relief and pride. Some linger to ask questions. Others hurry toward the door, eager to rejoin the wider world. You remain seated for a moment, reflecting on the significance of what you have witnessed. Education in this setting feels both ordinary and transformative. A subtle force guiding lives towards futures still uncertain. You step outside once more, blinking in the afternoon light. The street hums with renewed activity. Somewhere nearby a clock strikes the hour. You feel ready to continue your journey, carrying with you the echo of children's voices and the quiet promise that knowledge once kindled can illuminate even the most routine of days. You follow the tide of footsteps away from the schoolyard, and soon the character of the street changes again. The air feels warmer here, stirred by movement and voices that rise in lively bursts. Ahead the road widens into an open square framed by stalls, carts and makeshift awnings that flutter gently in the afternoon breeze. The marketplace greets you with a chorus of sound that feels almost musical after the measured discipline of the classroom. Laughter mingles with bargaining calls. A dog barks with enthusiastic purpose. Somewhere a barrel lid thumps shut with decisive finality. You step closer, drawn by the vibrant mix of scents that hang in the air. Fresh bread, sharp cheese, damp wool, and the faint sweetness of ripe fruit create an aroma that seems to wrap around you like an invitation. A widely known historical detail drifts into your awareness. Local markets in 19th century Britain function as vital hubs of exchange where food, news, and social connections flow together in ways that sustain entire communities. Watching the square come alive, you sense how commerce here is never purely transactional. It is also deeply human. A woman waves you toward her stall where baskets of vegetables are arranged in careful rows, carrots still dusted with soil, onions shining faintly in the sunlight. She speaks with cheerful confidence, describing her goods as though each carries a story worth hearing. You realize that selling involves performance as much as practicality. A curious little anecdote from this world slips into your thoughts. Some vendors develop distinctive cries or jingles to make their presence memorable, turning everyday trade into a kind of informal theatre. You listen and notice how each voice in the crowd has its own rhythm, its own persuasive charm. Children dart between stalls with bright eyes and quick laughter. Their energy seems to ripple through the gathering like sunlight through leaves. One boy pauses to watch a man demonstrate a pocket knife that gleams with promise. Another child clutches a small paper cone filled with roasted nuts, savouring each bite, as though time itself might slow to match his enjoyment. You feel a gentle sense of wonder at how simple pleasures can shape memory so vividly. Near the centre of the square, a group of men stands discussing the price of grain with animated gestures. Their conversation carries hints of concern beneath its outward cordiality. Scholars still debate whether fluctuations in market costs during the century create new opportunities for social mobility or deepen existing insecurities among working families. As you observe their expressions, you sense how economic change touches lives in ways both subtle and profound. The future often arrives disguised as a shift in numbers on a chalkboard. A bell rings from a nearby tower, its clear tone briefly rising above the bustle. For a moment the crowd seems to inhale together, then resumes its lively flow. You wander past a stall where bolts of cloth hang like colourful banners catching the light in soft ripples. A merchant invites you to feel the texture. The fabric is coarse yet durable, meant to withstand years of wear. A well-established historical fact comes gently to mind. The expanding textile industry ensures that even modest households can access manufactured goods that were once considered luxuries. You reflect on how such changes quietly alter expectations and aspirations. At the edge of the square, a storyteller has gathered a small audience. His voice rises and falls with dramatic flair, recounting tales of distant voyages and improbable adventures. The listeners lean in momentarily, transported beyond the limits of their everyday routines. You find yourself smiling at the power of imagination to soften reality's sharper edges. A girl beside you claps her hands in delight, her eyes shining with belief. In this space, stories become currency of another kind. The sun begins to drift lower, casting long shadows that stretch across the cobblestones like gentle reminders of time's passage. Vendors adjust their displays, mindful that the busiest hours may soon give way to quieter evening trade. You pause near a stall selling small trinkets carved from wood. Their simple shapes carry a certain charm, each one shaped by patient hands. You consider how such objects might serve as tokens of affection or markers of personal taste in a world where choice remains limited for many. As the afternoon light softens, you sense a subtle shift in mood. Voices grow slightly hushed. Movements become more deliberate. The marketplace, so vibrant moments ago, begins to settle into a calmer rhythm. Yet its influence lingers. Connections formed here will echo through conversations at supper tables and in letters written by candlelight. You realize that places like this help bind communities together, offering not only goods but also shared experience. You take a final walk around the square, letting the sounds and colours imprint themselves on your thoughts. Then you turn towards the lane that leads onward, aware that the day still holds many ordinary wonders waiting to be discovered. You leave the cheerful hum of the marketplace behind and follow a path that leads back toward the darker outlines of industry. The sun has climbed high enough now to press warmth gently against your shoulders, yet the air ahead carries a haze that softens its brightness. A bell rings somewhere beyond the rooftops, not as a warning this time, but as a summons. You notice how people around you respond almost instinctively, altering direction or quickening pace. This is the signal for midday pause, a brief interruption in the long sequence of labour. Soon you reach an open patch of ground beside a row of factory buildings whose tall windows glimmer faintly with reflected light. Workers gather here in loose clusters, some settling on overturned crates, others leaning against brick walls warmed by the afternoon sun. The noise of machinery continues behind those walls, yet outside the atmosphere feels unexpectedly calm. A well-documented historical observation settles into your awareness. Industrial schedules in 19th century Britain often include short meal breaks that become crucial moments of rest and social exchange for those whose days are shaped by repetitive tasks. You find a place on a low stone ledge and unwrap the piece of bread given to you earlier. Its crust has hardened slightly, yet the simple act of eating in shared company brings a quiet satisfaction. Nearby, two women pour tea from a dented kettle into mismatched cups, their movements efficient and unhurried. Steam curls upward, carrying a comforting scent that mingles with the sharper tang of coal smoke. You realize how such modest rituals help transform necessity into something resembling leisure. A curious little practice from the era drifts into your thoughts. Some workers believe that sitting in the same spot each day during the midday break might invite consistency or luck in their tasks. You watch as a man brushes dust from a particular crate before settling onto it with visible relief. Whether guided by superstition or simple preference, his choice reveals the human desire to claim small territories of comfort within demanding environments. Conversation begins to ripple through the gathering. Topics range from the weather's unpredictable moves to rumours of new machinery rumoured to arrive next season. You listen as voices rise and fall, noticing how laughter often punctuates even the most practical discussions. Scholars still debate whether these brief communal pauses strengthen bonds among labourers, or merely offer fleeting distraction from deeper concerns about wages and working conditions. Sitting here now, you sense that both interpretations may hold truth. The warmth of companionship feels genuine. So does the undercurrent of uncertainty that shapes each exchange. A boy shares slices of apple from a cloth bundle, passing them around with shy generosity. Someone produces a small concertina and coaxes a tune into the air. Its cheerful notes drift across the yard, momentarily softening the rigid outlines of factory life. You feel the tension in your shoulders ease as music weaves its way through the group. It is not grand or polished, yet it carries a spirit of resilience that seems to anchor everyone in the present moment. A widely accepted historical point surfaces in your mind. For many working people, midday meals remain simple and portable, reflecting both economic necessity and the limited time available between shifts. Bread, cheese and tea form a dependable trio sustaining energies without demanding elaborate preparation. You consider how such habits shape the rhythm of daily life, turning nourishment into a practical art rather than a leisurely indulgence. Clouds drift slowly overhead, their shadows sliding across the ground like gentle reminders that afternoon will not linger forever. Some workers stretch their legs or close their eyes for a few precious minutes of stillness. Others trade stories about childhood villages or distant relatives whose letters arrive at irregular intervals. You notice how memory becomes a form of escape, allowing minds to wander even as bodies remain tethered to routine. The bell sounds again, its tone firmer now. Conversations taper off, cups are drained, the concertina falls silent. You watch as people rise with measured reluctance, brushing dust from their clothes and adjusting scarves or caps. The transition back to labour feels both inevitable and strangely graceful, as though everyone has rehearsed this sequence countless times. You remain seated for a moment longer, savouring the fading warmth of shared rest. Then you stand and follow the others toward the factory doors. The afternoon awaits with its familiar demands, yet you carry with you the echo of laughter and music that briefly transformed an ordinary pause into something quietly memorable. You move away from the factory yard and into a quieter stretch of town where narrow lanes twist between modest houses. The sunlight has softened slightly, filtered through a pale veil of drifting cloud. Here the air feels gentler, touched by the scent of soap-damp linen and something faintly herbal that lingers near open doorways. You slow your pace almost without realizing it. The rhythm of this place invites observation rather than urgency. Ahead, a wooden gate stands ajar, revealing a small yard where garments sway on a line like silent flags. A woman bends over a wash tub, her sleeves rolled high as she works with steady determination. The water catches the light in bright flickers, each movement sending tiny ripples across its surface. A broadly accepted historical insight rises quietly in your thoughts. Much of the labour that sustains households during this century remains largely unseen, carried out by the women whose daily efforts shape comfort and cleanliness without public acknowledgement. You step closer, careful not to intrude, yet curious to witness the ritual unfolding before you. The woman lifts a heavy sheet, wringing it with practiced strength before draping it across the line. Steam curls upward, mingling with the afternoon air. Her motions are repetitive yet precise, guided by knowledge learned through years rather than formal instruction. A faint smile appears on her face as she pauses to stretch her back. You sense pride in that fleeting expression, a quiet recognition of work well done. A curious social habit from this era drifts into your awareness. Some households believe that hanging laundry outdoors on certain days brings good fortune or freshened spirits as well as fabric. You glance along the row of fluttering cloth and imagine how such beliefs might lend meaning to tasks that otherwise feel endless. Ritual, even in small forms, becomes a way of transforming necessity into something more bearable. Inside the open doorway, you glimpse another scene. A young girl sits near the hearth with needle and thread, mending a tear in a worn jacket. Her concentration is intense. Each stitch is placed with care, as though the act of repair holds significance beyond the garment itself. Scholars still debate whether these domestic skills empower women by granting them practical authority within the household or confine them within roles that limit broader opportunity. Watching her work, you sense the complexity of that question. There is creativity here, there is also constraint. The yard fills with gentle sounds that contrast sharply with the industrial roar you left behind. Water sloshing, cloth snapping softly in the breeze, a sparrow chirping from the fence post as though offering commentary on the proceedings. You sit on a low step, letting the calm seep into your thoughts. The pace of time feels different in this space. Hours are measured not by bells or machinery, but by the slow drying of fabric in sunlight. A widely acknowledged historical fact settles into your mind. Laundry during this period often requires significant physical effort involving boiling, scrubbing, and careful rinsing in order to maintain hygiene in crowded urban environments. You consider how such routines demand both endurance and resourcefulness. Soap must be made or purchased. Water must be fetched. Lines must be strung where light and air can do their work. Every stage reveals a quiet determination to create order within the unpredictable flow of daily life. A neighbour leans over the fence to exchange a few words with the woman at the tub. Their conversation moves easily between practical advice and shared humour. Laughter rises light and genuine, breaking the stillness like birds taking flight. You realise how social connection often thrives in these humble spaces, woven into the fabric of routine tasks. Stories are traded alongside techniques for removing stubborn stains or mending frayed hems. Clouds shifted overhead, sending brief shadows across the yard. The girl by the hearth looks up and blinks as the light changes, then returns to her stitching with renewed focus. Her small fingers move with surprising confidence. You wonder what future awaits her, how the skills she learns today might shape the path she walks tomorrow. The answer remains uncertain, yet the act of preparation itself feels quietly significant. As the afternoon deepens, garments begin to dry their surfaces, warmed by lingering sun. The woman gathers them one by one, folding with methodical care. You stand to help passing pieces of cloth into her waiting hands. She thanks you with a nod that speaks volumes. In that simple gesture you sense the shared humanity that underlies even the most routine moments. You step back through the gate and onto the lane, carrying with you the memory of soap-scented air and fluttering linen. The day continues to unfold in its patient way, revealing how unseen efforts sustain the visible world. You walk on, ready to discover what other quiet labours shape the passing hours of ordinary lives. You follow the winding lane until it narrows into a cramped courtyard enclosed by tall brick walls that seem to hold both warmth and echoes. The sunlight here feels softer, filtered through a haze of chimney smoke and drifting dust. Voices reach you first. High-pitched laughter, the quick rhythm of running footsteps, a sudden burst of argument that dissolves into giggles. You step through the archway and find yourself in a lively world shaped almost entirely by children. They move across the packed earth with remarkable energy, inventing games from whatever lies at hand. A wooden hoop rolls past you, guided by a stick wielded with intense concentration. Two girls skip in a pattern so practiced it feels like choreography, their boots tapping out a steady beat. The courtyard vibrates with motion, a sharp contrast to the measured labour you have witnessed elsewhere. A widely recognised historical detail comes quietly to mind. Urban children in 19th century Britain often create their own amusements in narrow spaces, transforming limited surroundings into landscapes of imagination. You lean against the wall and watch as a small group gathers around a chalk drawing on the ground. Lines mark out a grid for a hopping game whose rules seem both strict and constantly evolving. A boy misjudges his landing and topples sideways, only to spring up laughing before anyone can scold him. The resilience of youth reveals itself in these fleeting moments of joy. You realise how play becomes a form of escape, allowing young minds to wander far beyond brick boundaries. A curious fragment of cultural habit drifts into your thoughts. Some children believe that carrying a lucky pebble in their pocket might improve their chances of winning games or avoiding mishaps. You notice one girl clutching a smooth stone as she waits her turn, her expression solemn with hope. Such small superstitions add a layer of magic to an otherwise ordinary afternoon. At the far end of the courtyard, a pair of older boys lean against a fence, engaged in a contest of storytelling. Their voices rise and fall with dramatic flair as they recount imagined adventures at sea or daring encounters with highwaymen. Scholars still debate whether such tales serve merely as entertainment or help shape early aspirations by offering glimpses of lives beyond familiar streets. Listening now, you sense how imagination stretches the boundaries of possibility, even when circumstances remain unchanged. A gust of wind sweeps through the archway, sending loose scraps of paper skittering across the ground. The children chase them with delighted cries, or turning inconvenience into opportunity. You smile at their ability to transform the unexpected into play. A well-established historical observation settles into your awareness. In densely populated districts, shared courtyards often function as informal community spaces, where social bonds form naturally among younger residents. One boy pauses beside you, breathless from running. He offers a shy grin before darting back into the fray. His cheeks are flushed. His eyes shine with determination that seems larger than his years. You sense how these games teach skills that will later translate into work and responsibility. Balance, cooperation, quick thinking. Lessons absorbed not through formal instruction but through experience. Nearby, a girl begins to hum a tune while tracing patterns in the dust with her toe. Others join in, their voices blending into a spontaneous chorus. The melody drifts upward, softening the hard lines of the surrounding walls. You feel a gentle calm settle over the scene, as though time itself pauses to listen. The contrast between youthful freedom and the constraints of adult routine becomes almost tangible. A commonly noted historical fact surfaces in your thoughts. Many working-class children during this era juggle play with household duties or employment, their afternoons divided between fleeting leisure and practical obligation. Watching them now, you sense how each laugh carries an awareness that the game may end at any moment. A mother's call from a doorway, a bell signalling supper, the approach of evening shadows. The light begins to shift, stretching long shapes across the courtyard. Dust glows briefly in the slanting rays before settling once more. One by one, children gather their belongings or brush dirt from their clothes. The tempo of play slows, replaced by quiet farewells and promises to meet again tomorrow. You remain by the wall, reflecting on how such simple gatherings nurture resilience and companionship in ways that formal institutions rarely can. As the courtyard empties, the echo of laughter lingers like a memory you are reluctant to release. You step back through the archway and into the lane, carrying with you the awareness that ordinary moments of childhood joy form an essential thread in the broader tapestry of everyday life. The day is not yet done, shadows lengthen. Somewhere ahead, new stories wait patiently to unfold. You continue along the lane until the tight embrace of brick walls loosens into wider streets that seem to hum with anticipation. The air carries a new vibration now, something metallic and rhythmic that you cannot yet see but instinctively recognize as movement on a grander scale. A faint plume of steam rises beyond a line of warehouses. It curls upward like a signal, drawing your curiosity forward. Before long, you reach the edge of a railway platform alive with a quiet urgency. Men in caps consult pocket watches. Women clutch parcels wrapped in cloth. A porter strides past, balancing a trunk that looks heavier than his steady expression suggests. You pause beneath the iron canopy and take in the scene. A widely acknowledged historical reality settles into your awareness. The rapid expansion of railway networks during the 19th century transforms travel in Britain, shrinking distances and reshaping how ordinary people imagine the possibilities of their lives. A whistle sounds somewhere along the track. It begins as a distant wail, then grows into a commanding presence that vibrates through the soles of your boots. You watch as the train emerges from a cloud of steam, its dark form gleaming faintly with moisture. The engine breathes like a living creature, releasing bursts of vapour that drift across the platform in ghostly swirls. You feel both excitement and a hint of unease. This is progress made visible, powerful, yet unpredictable. You climb into a carriage where wooden benches line the walls and narrow windows frame glimpses of the outside world. The door closes with a firm click. For a moment, everyone sits in expectant silence. Then the train lurches forward, setting wheels into motion with a rhythm that feels both exhilarating and oddly soothing. Fields slide past in blear-eyed shades of green and brown as tendrils appear and vanish like fragments of papyrus. A curious practice from the era drifts into your thoughts. Some early travellers carry sprigs of lavender or other herbs to counteract the unfamiliar smells of coal smoke and crowded compartments. You notice a woman near the window lifting a small bundle of dried flowers to her nose, her expression softening as the train gathers speed. Such small acts of comfort reveal how people adapt to new experiences with quiet ingenuity. Across from you, a young clerk studies a newspaper with intense concentration. Headlines speak of distant events, political debates, and technological marvels that promise further change. Scholars still debate whether access to faster transport encourages broader social mobility or simply accelerates existing patterns of inequality. As you watch the clerk trace lines of print with his finger, you sense the mixture of hope and apprehension that accompanies every innovation. The landscape unfolds in a gentle panorama. Rivers glint in the afternoon light. Smoke rises from factory chimneys in distant towns. Sheep graze in fields bordered by hedges that seem to stretch endlessly toward the horizon. You realize how rail travel alters not only physical distance but also perception. Journeys that once required days now pass within hours, reshaping expectations about time and possibility. A commonly noted historical fact surfaces in your awareness. Third-class carriages offer affordable access to travel for many working people, though. Comfort remains limited compared with more privileged compartments. You shift slightly on the hard bench, aware that the experience demands both endurance and curiosity. The clatter of wheels becomes a steady lullaby, punctuated by the occasional hiss of steam. A child peers out the window with wide eyes, pointing at each passing landmark as though it might vanish if not acknowledged. His excitement spreads through the carriage like sunlight breaking through cloud. You smile, remembering how wonder often accompanies first encounters with change. Even adults allow themselves brief moments of awe before settling back into practical concerns. The train slows as it approaches a rural station little more than a wooden shelter and a stretch of gravel. Passengers rise, gathering belongings with careful movements. Doors open, fresh air rushes in carrying scents of grass and damp earth that feel almost luxurious after the enclosed space. You step down onto the platform and watch as the engine exhales one final plume before continuing its journey. For a moment you stand still, letting the quiet countryside settle around you. The experience has shifted something in your perception. Distance feels smaller. Time feels more fluid. Ordinary life reveals new dimensions shaped by the steady advance of technology. You turn towards the path leading away from the tracks, aware that each step forward will carry echoes of this transformative ride. You leave the quiet rural platform and follow a sandy path that winds gently toward the distant murmur of waves. The air begins to change even before the sea comes into view. It carries a sharper freshness now, tinged with salt and the faint tang of seaweed drying in the sun. Gulls cry overhead, their voices bright and insistent. Each step feels lighter somehow, as though the very thought of open water loosens the weight of routine from your shoulders. Soon the horizon reveals itself in a shimmering band of silver blue. The shoreline stretches wide, dotted with figures moving at a leisurely pace that contrasts with the purposeful strides of town life. Children race ahead to chase foamy edges of receding tide. Couples stroll arm in arm, pausing now and then to admire the restless glitter of sunlight on waves. A widely recognised historical insight drifts into your awareness. Seaside visits grow increasingly popular among ordinary Britons during the 19th century, encouraged by railway travel and the belief that fresh coastal air offers restorative health benefits. You wander across the sand, noticing how its texture shifts from firm near the water's edge to soft and yielding further inland. Wooden bathing machines stand in neat rows like patient sentinels, their wheels half sunk in the grains. A curious little custom from the era surfaces in your thoughts. Some holidaymakers prefer to enter the sea from these wheeled cabins, preserving modesty while also turning the act of bathing into a small adventure. You watch as one is slowly guided toward the surf, its occupant peering cautiously through a narrow opening. Laughter drifts toward you from a cluster of families gathered around striped blankets. The scent of picnic fare mingles with the briny breeze. Bread, cheese, and jars of homemade preserves form simple feasts enjoyed with evident delight. You realize how leisure here does not require extravagance. It emerges through shared time, through the rare luxury of pausing without immediate obligation. Scholars still debate whether such excursions truly democratize pleasure, or simply provide temporary escape from the social structures that shape everyday existence. Observing the scene now, you sense how both interpretations intertwine like currents beneath the surface. A man with rolled sleeves stands near the shoreline, demonstrating how to skim flat stones across the water. Each successful skip earns applause from watching children. The small triumphs of holiday amusement feel almost ceremonial. You find yourself drawn into their enthusiasm, selecting a pebble and attempting a throw of your own. It sinks with an unremarkable splash, yet the laughter that follows feels warm rather than mocking. In this space, failure becomes part of the shared experience. A well-established historical fact comes gently to mind. Seaside resorts expand rapidly during this period, offering entertainment such as music pavilions, promenades, and modest refreshment stands designed to welcome visitors from varied backgrounds. You stroll along a wooden pier where vendors sell sweets wrapped in paper twists. A band strikes up a cheerful tune, its notes carried far across the open water. The rhythm encourages passers-by to slow their pace to savour the sensation of being momentarily untethered from routine. Clouds drift lazily across the sky, casting moving shadows that ripple over sand and surf. You sit on a weathered bench and watch the tide creep closer, its steady advance both soothing and slightly hypnotic. Nearby, a woman collects shells with careful attention, examining each one as though it might hold a secret. A playful superstition from the era whispers through your thoughts. Some believe that carrying a shell home ensures safe journeys in the future, linking memory with protection in subtle ways. As afternoon deepens, the light grows warmer, turning the sea's surface into a shifting mosaic of gold and blue. Conversations soften, footsteps slow. You notice how even the gulls seem to circle more lazily, their cries less urgent than before. The atmosphere encourages reflection. You consider how such brief holidays might reshape perspectives, offering glimpses of broader horizons that linger long after the return to work. Eventually, people will begin to gather their belongings, brushing sand from shoes and folding blankets with practiced ease. The tide has reached its quiet peak. Waves sigh against the shore as though reluctant to release the day. You stand and take a final look at the vast waterline, committing its calm expanse to memory. There is comfort in knowing that places like this exist ready to receive weary travellers with open skies and the promise of renewal. You turn back toward the path, aware that evening approaches with gentle inevitability. The journey continues, carrying with it the echo of gull calls and the soothing rhythm of the sea. You leave the wide openness of the coast behind and follow a gently rising road that leads back toward clustered rooftops and the faint outline of a spire against the evening sky. The air grows cooler as shadows lengthen, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and distant cooking fires. Bells begin to ring in measured harmony, their tones neither urgent nor celebratory but steady and reassuring. You sense that this part of the day belongs to reflection as much as routine. Soon you reach the steps of a parish church whose doors stand open in quiet invitation. Candlelight flickers within, casting warm patterns on worn wooden pews. You enter with a soft awareness of hushed voices and rustling garments. A widely accepted historical observation settles into your thoughts. Religious attendance plays a central role in many British communities during the 19th century, shaping moral expectations and offering comfort amid social change. You find a seat near the back, allowing your eyes to adjust to the dim glow. Families gather in familiar clusters, their postures conveying both reverence and familiarity. A child fidgets beside her mother, tracing shapes on the polished bench with absent curiosity. The organ begins to hum its deep notes, filling the space like a slow tide. You feel the vibrations in your chest, grounding you in the present moment. A curious practice from the era drifts through your awareness. Some parishioners keep small tokens such as pressed flowers tucked inside hymn books, believing they carry blessings from past services. You notice a man gently smoothing the edge of a fragile bloom before closing his book with careful precision. Such gestures reveal how faith intertwines with personal memory, turning shared rituals into intimate experiences. The minister rises to speak, his voice calm and deliberate. He weaves familiar teachings with references to everyday struggles, acknowledging the challenges faced by workers, families, and travellers alike. Scholars still debate whether religious institutions during this period primarily reinforce existing hierarchies or provide genuine spaces for solidarity and compassion. Listening now, you sense the complexity of that question. Words of guidance offer both reassurance and subtle reminders of societal order. Light from the stained glass windows fades as twilight deepens outside. Colours that once glowed now soften into muted silhouettes. A well-known historical fact comes gently to mind. Sunday observances often structure the weekly rhythm of life, marking time not only through labour and leisure, but also through moments set aside for contemplation. You feel the weight of that rhythm in the steady cadence of prayers and responses. A hymn begins its melody, rising with fragile confidence. Voices join one by one, creating a tapestry of sound that seems to float beneath the vaulted ceiling. You add your own quiet tone, blending into the collective harmony. For a brief moment, distinctions of class or occupation feel less pronounced. Everyone becomes part of the same gentle chorus. When the service ends, people linger in the aisles, exchanging greetings and bits of news. The transition from solemnity to sociability unfolds with graceful ease. Outside, the evening air feels almost luminous after the candle-lit interior. Stars begin to appear overhead, faint at first and then more certain. You pause on the church steps, watching as families drift toward home along lantern-lit paths. The experience leaves you with a sense of calm continuity. Faith here functions not only as doctrine but as shared practice, a thread woven through daily existence. You turn away at last, guided by the soft glow of lamplight and the quiet knowledge that night will soon gather around the town once more. You continue along the dimming street, guided now by scattered lanterns whose gentle glow pools on the cobblestones like liquid amber. Evening has settled with quiet authority. Doors close, voices soften. Somewhere nearby, a window creaks open to release the faint scent of boiled herbs and warmed broth. You sense that this part of the day belongs to care and caution, to the fragile balance between health and uncertainty that shapes so many ordinary lives. A modest house ahead draws your attention. Its shutters stand half closed, yet a thin ribbon of light escapes through the gap. You step closer and hear the muted murmur of concerned conversation. Inside, a child rests on a narrow bed, while an older woman adjusts a cloth across his forehead with practiced tenderness. A widely acknowledged historical reality comes gently into your awareness. Illness remains a frequent presence in 19th century Britain, with limited medical knowledge and uneven access to professional care shaping how families respond to sickness. You linger near the doorway, careful not to intrude. The air carries a sharp blend of vinegar and dried lavender scents believed to cleanse both body and atmosphere. A curious domestic remedy from the era drifts into your thoughts. Some households hang bunches of aromatic plants near sleeping spaces in the hope that their fragrance might ward off fever or bring restorative sleep. You notice such bundles tied neatly above the bed, their pale leaves trembling in the candlelight. The older woman speaks in calm, reassuring tones while stirring a small pot over the hearth. Steam rises, clouding the room with warmth. You sense how knowledge of simple treatments passes quietly from one generation to the next, shaped by experience rather than formal instruction. Scholars still debate whether reliance on traditional cures provides comfort through familiarity or delays the adoption of emerging medical practices. Observing the scene, now you feel the weight of both perspectives. Care here is heartfelt. So is uncertainty. A neighbour arrives carrying a folded blanket and a small jar of honey. Her presence brings a ripple of gratitude that softens anxious expressions. Community support reveals itself not through grand gestures but through steady acts of kindness. A well-documented historical point settles into your awareness. Mutual aid networks often play a crucial role in managing illness during this century, especially in working-class districts where professional doctors remain scarce or costly. You sit quietly on a wooden chair listening to the rhythm of breathing in the dim room. Outside, the world continues its gradual descent into night. Hoofbeats echo faintly along the road. A distant clock strikes the hour with measured certainty. Time seems to stretch in this space, each minute shaped by watchfulness and hope. The child stirs and opens his eyes, briefly meeting your gaze, with a flicker of curiosity before drifting back into uneasy sleep. You feel a sudden awareness of how fragile ordinary existence can be, how easily routine gives way to worry. Yet there is resilience here as well. The older woman hums softly while adjusting the fire, her melody steady as a heartbeat. A commonly recognized historical observation surfaces in your thoughts. Advances in sanitation and public health begin to improve conditions gradually during the 19th century, yet progress remains uneven across regions and social classes. You consider how such changes unfold quietly, often unnoticed until years later when their impact becomes clearer. Eventually the candle burns lower, its flame wavering like a tired sentinel. The neighbour takes her leave. The room grows still except for the occasional crackle of embers. You rise and step back into the cool night air, carrying with you the memory of lavender-scented shadows and whispered reassurance. The street stretches ahead, calm yet filled with unseen stories. You walk on slowly, aware that even in moments of vulnerability, ordinary lives continue to find strength in care, companionship, and the gentle persistence of hope. You move onward through streets that now glow softly beneath the scattered light of gas lamps. Their pale halos shimmer on damp stone, turning puddles into mirrors of wavering gold. The night has not fully claimed the town yet. Instead, it lingers in that delicate hour when activity continues in quieter forms. Windows remain lit, footsteps echo more distinctly. The air carries a blend of ink, smoke, and distant laughter that feels both intimate and expansive. A small shop near the sauna still welcomes visitors. Its front window displays neatly stacked newspapers whose bold headlines catch your eye even from the pavement. You step inside and are greeted by the dry, comforting scent of paper mingled with dust and candle wax. Shelves line the walls, filled with pamphlets, almanacs, and letters awaiting collection. A well-established historical reality settles into your awareness. The growth of print culture during the 19th century plays a vital role in shaping public opinion, spreading news and connecting communities across increasing distances. You pick up a folded sheet and trace the lines of type with curious attention. Reports of political debates sit beside notices of local events and advertisements for remedies that promise almost miraculous results. A curious tidbit from this era drifts into your thoughts. Some readers develop the habit of sharing newspapers aloud in homes or public spaces, turning private information into collective experience. You imagine voices rising around a kitchen table, each paragraph sparking discussion or gentle disagreement. The shopkeeper offers you a seat by the counter where a lantern burns steadily. He speaks of how deliveries arrive by rail at dawn, bringing stories from cities you may never visit. Scholars still debate whether increased access to printed news encourages critical awareness among ordinary people, or simply reinforces prevailing ideas shaped by powerful institutions. Listening to his measured tone, you sense the excitement and uncertainty that accompany new channels of information. Outside, the muffled clatter of a passing carriage reminds you that life continues beyond the shop's warm interior. You step back onto the street clutching a pamphlet that feels surprisingly weighty despite its modest size. Its pages rustle like leaves in a quiet forest. A widely recognized historical observation comes gently to mind. Literacy rates rise steadily throughout the century, transforming reading from a specialized skill into a more common part of daily routine for many households. A young couple stands beneath a lamp reading a notice posted on the wall, their brows knit in concentration as they exchange whispered comments. You pause nearby, struck by the simple power of shared interpretation. Words here shape expectations about work, travel, and opportunity. They also offer glimpses of worlds far beyond the town's familiar boundaries. Farther along the road, a group gathers near the entrance to a modest reading room. Through its open door, you glimpse tables scattered with periodicals and men engaged in quiet debate. The atmosphere feels almost irreverent, as though knowledge itself commands respect. A small superstition from the time surfaces in your thoughts. Some readers believe that beginning a new book at dusk brings particularly vivid dreams linking learning with the mysterious workings of the night. You wander past shuttered storefronts and dimly lit windows, letting the rhythm of your steps match the steady unfolding of evening. The printed words you have encountered linger in your mind like distant voices. They remind you that ideas travel in ways not always visible, influencing choices and shaping futures in subtle increments. At the edge of the square, a lamplighter moves from post to post, igniting flames that push back darkness with gentle determination. You watch his silhouette against the glow, aware that each light extends the hours in which people can read, write, or converse. The transformation of night into usable time feels almost miraculous. You continue walking, aware that the day's experiences have expanded your understanding of how ordinary lives intersect with wider currents of change. Somewhere ahead, candles flicker in windows where letters are being written or stories quietly shared. You follow the path towards those small constellations of light, ready to witness how communication shapes the texture of evening in this ever-evolving century. You continue along the lamplit street until the glow of public lights fades into the softer shimmer of candles seen through curtained windows. Night has settled fully now, yet the town has not surrendered to sleep. Instead, it seems to breathe more slowly, as though the day's urgency has been folded away like a garment set aside until morning. You feel your own pace soften in response, guided by the gentle pull of quiet domestic scenes unfolding behind closed doors. A small cottage with a low thatched roof draws your attention. Its doorway stands open just enough to release a warm ribbon of light onto the path. You step inside with quiet curiosity and find a room arranged around a modest hearth where shadows dance along the walls. The scent of beeswax and baked apples lingers in the air, comforting in its simplicity. A well-known historical observation rises gently in your thoughts. Evenings by candlelight form a central feature of daily routine for many families in 19th century Britain, providing time for rest, reflection and shared storytelling after long hours of labour. You settle onto a wooden stool near the fire listening, as voices weave together in easy conversation. A grandfather recounts memories of a distant harvest season, while a younger child leans forward with bright fascination. The narrative unfolds slowly, punctuated by pauses and laughter that reveal how oral tradition continues to shape family identity. A curious little custom from the period drifts into your awareness. Some households encourage children to repeat fragments of tales they hear, believing that retelling strengthens memory and binds generations through shared imagination. The candle flame flickers as a draft slips beneath the door. Its light seems to stretch and shrink with each movement of air, casting shifting patterns across simple furnishings. You watch how faces glow briefly, then retreat into shadow. The effect feels almost theatrical, as though the room itself participates in the storytelling. Scholars still debate whether such intimate gatherings primarily reinforce established values or offer subtle opportunities for questioning the world beyond familiar walls. Observing the attentive expressions around you, you sense that both possibilities exist side by side. A woman sits at a small table mending a tear in a sleeve while listening to the tale. Her needle moves with steady rhythm, each stitch aligning with the cadence of spoken words. A widely acknowledged historical fact comes quietly to mind. In homes lit only by candles or oil lamps, evening tasks often require careful attention to conserve both fuel and eyesight, shaping how families organize their time once daylight fades. You notice how she leans closer to the flame, adjusting her posture to capture every available glimmer. From outside comes the faint hoot of an owl and the distant clatter of someone returning late from work. These sounds slip into the room like quiet reminders that the wider world continues its nocturnal routines, yet inside the atmosphere remains sheltered and calm. A kettle warms gently at the edge of the fire, releasing wisps of steam that soften the edges of thought. A playful superstition from the era surfaces in your mind. Some believe that blowing out a candle at precisely the same moment each night might encourage restful sleep and protect the household from restless dreams. You wonder whether tonight's gathering will end with such a ritual. For now, no one seems eager to conclude the shared comfort of conversation. Eventually the story reaches its final turning point. A satisfied murmur passes through the room. Children stretch tired limbs. The woman ties off her thread with a decisive knot. Silence settles not as emptiness but as a gentle blanket laid across the evening. You realize how moments like these allow ordinary people to reclaim a sense of control over time, transforming night from mere darkness into an opportunity for connection. You step back outside, greeted by a sky scattered with patient stars. The path ahead glimmers faintly in their light. As you walk on, you carry with you the echo of voices, softened by candle glow, aware that such simple rituals shape the emotional landscape of an entire century. You continue along the narrow street until a different kind of glow catches your eye. It spills from the windows of a public house whose door swings open and shut with steady rhythm, releasing bursts of laughter, music, and the comforting aroma of roasted barley. The night air feels cooler here, yet the warmth within beckons like a familiar promise. You pause at the threshold for a moment, listening. Voices rise in spirited conversation. A fiddle strikes a lively note that seems to ripple through the wooden floorboards. Stepping inside, you are greeted by an atmosphere both bustling and intimate. Tankards rest on polished surfaces, worn smooth by years of use. Candles flicker along the walls, their light reflecting an amber liquid that catches the eye with quiet allure. A widely recognized historical detail drifts into your thoughts. Taverns and public houses serve as vital social centres in 19th century Britain, offering spaces where workers, travellers and neighbours gather to exchange news songs and companionship after long days of labour. You find a seat near the hearth where a small fire glows with patient steadiness. A man beside you raises his mug in greeting, his expression open and genial. Conversation flows easily around you, carried by the shared understanding that this place exists partly to lighten burdens that weigh heavily outside its doors. A curious cultural quirk from the period surfaces in your awareness. Some patrons believe that tapping the table twice before taking a drink might invite good fortune or keep misfortune at bay. You notice several hands performing this small ritual almost unconsciously. At the far end of the room, a musician coaxes a tune from his fiddle, while another keeps time with rhythmic claps. The melody winds through the crowd like a bright thread, drawing people closer together. Scholars still debate whether such gatherings foster genuine community solidarity or occasionally serve as outlets for tension shaped by economic uncertainty and social hierarchy. Observing the scene now, you sense the truth in both views. Laughter rings out with authentic warmth, yet beneath it lingers a hint of restlessness that refuses to disappear entirely. A commonly acknowledged historical fact settles gently into your thoughts. Alcoholic beverages during this era vary widely in quality and strength, influencing both social customs and public debates about moderation. You watch as a woman sips her drink slowly, her gaze attentive to the stories unfolding around her. Nearby, two men argue amiably about the merits of different brewing methods, their gestures animated but friendly. The air grows warmer as more patrons arrive, bringing with them traces of rain smoke and the crisp scent of night. You realize how public houses offer a rare environment where distinctions of occupation soften, at least temporarily. A dock worker exchanges jokes with a clerk. A farmer recounts a tale that leaves listeners shaking with laughter. The shared experience of music and conversation weaves individuals into a collective narrative that feels almost timeless. A playful superstition from the era drifts into your mind. Some believe that singing the final verse of a song slightly louder than the others ensures continued luck in the coming week. You listen as voices swell in unison, each note carrying both joy and determination. The room vibrates with energy that seems to push back against the darkness outside. Eventually the music slows, tankards empty. Chairs scrape softly across the floor as patrons prepare to depart. The atmosphere shifts from lively to contemplative, like embers settling after a bright flame. You step outside once more, greeted by cool air that clears your thoughts. The stars appear sharper now, their light reflecting faintly on damp cobblestones. You walk on aware that the echoes of song and fellowship linger within you. In places like this, ordinary lives find brief sanctuary from routine pressures, reminding you that even in an age of rapid change, simple human connection remains a powerful source of comfort. You leave the warmth and lingering music of the public house behind, stepping into a quieter quarter of the town where the night air feels heavier and more reflective. Lantern light reveals rows of dwellings that differ greatly from the tidy courtyards you have seen earlier. Some cottages sit back from the road with small gardens enclosed by simple fences. Others crowd close together, their walls rising in stern lines that seem to press against one another for support. You sense immediately that housing itself tells stories about comfort, aspiration, and endurance. You walk first toward a modest cottage whose window glows with steady light. Inside, a family gathers around a wooden table set for a late meal. The scent of stew drifts outward, mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil from the garden. A widely accepted historical observation comes gently into your awareness. Many rural and small-town households during the 19th century live in compact but self-contained homes, often combining living and working spaces in ways that blur the boundary between domestic and economic life. A man steps outside carrying a lantern, nodding to you with quiet courtesy before checking a row of tools stacked neatly against the wall. His movements suggest routine rather than urgency. Nearby, a child peers through the fence at the moon, tracing its pale shape with an outstretched finger. You feel a momentary sense of calm in this scene, as though the cottage holds within it a fragile balance of simplicity and resilience. Further along the lane, the character of housing shifts abruptly. Tall tenement buildings loom overhead, their windows arranged in tight grids that seem to multiply shadows. You enter a narrow passage where voices echo from unseen rooms. The air carries the combined scents of cooking fires, damp laundry, and the faint tang of coal. Scholars still debate whether rapid urban expansion during this period provides necessary accommodation for growing populations or deepens the hardships associated with overcrowding and limited sanitation. Walking here now, you sense how the question lives in every corner. A curious domestic practice from the era surfaces in your thoughts. Some residents mark their doorframes with small chalk symbols believed to bring protection or luck. You notice faint white lines near a threshold almost invisible in the dim light. Such gestures suggest an effort to claim a sense of control within uncertain surroundings. You climb a creaking staircase lit only by a single candle placed on the landing. Doors open briefly to reveal glimpses of daily life unfolding behind thin walls. A woman rocks a baby beside a small stove. Two young men share a loaf of bread while exchanging weary smiles. A widely acknowledged historical fact settles quietly into your awareness. In crowded urban districts, multiple families often share limited facilities, shaping routines that require patience, cooperation, and ingenuity. At the top of the stairs, a narrow corridor stretches ahead like a tunnel of muted whispers. You pause to listen. Somewhere a violin plays a hesitant melody. Somewhere else, laughter breaks the stillness, proving that joy finds ways to exist even in constrained spaces. The contrast between these dwellings and the cottage you visited earlier feels profound yet not entirely divisive. Each environment reveals a different adaptation to circumstance. Outside, again, you notice how the night sky appears fragmented between rooftops, its stars reduced to scattered fragments of light. You walk slowly, absorbing the varied textures of housing that define this town's identity. A small superstition from the time drifts into your mind. Some believe that opening a window before sleep allows worries to escape into the darkness, leaving the household calmer by morning. You see shutters drawn back in several rooms, their occupants perhaps hoping for the same gentle reassurance. The street grows quieter as you continue. Lamps flicker low, footsteps fade. You realize that dwellings are more than structures of brick or timber. They are vessels of memory, effort, and hope. Understanding how people live within them offers insight into the subtle forces shaping everyday existence. You pause at the end of the lane and look back at the varied silhouettes of roofs and chimneys. The scene feels both ordinary and deeply meaningful. Then you turn once more toward the path ahead, aware that the night still holds further reflections on how time passes for those who call this century home. You continue along the quiet road until the town thins into open ground where fields stretch beneath a sky brushed with silver cloud. The night carries a hint of approaching chill, even though the season still lingers between warmth and coolness. You sense that time here moves not only by clocks or bells, but by the steady turning of the year itself. Wind rustles through hedgerows like a whisper, reminding you that change is constant even when days seem endlessly similar. A path curves gently toward a cluster of farm buildings, whose outlines appear softened by moonlight. Lanterns glow faintly in a few windows, suggesting that evening tasks have not yet fully ended. A widely acknowledged historical observation rises in your thoughts. Seasonal cycles shape labour patterns throughout 19th century Britain, influencing everything from harvest schedules to moods and social gatherings. You feel this influence in the damp earth beneath your boots and in the quiet expectancy of fields waiting for the next phase of growth. You walk past a barn where hay has been stacked with careful precision. The scent is warm and comforting, carrying memories of sunlit afternoons and distant laughter. A man emerges from the shadows carrying a pitchfork over his shoulder. He pauses to greet you, his breath visible in the cooling air. The simplicity of the exchange reveals how routine tasks connect individuals to the broader rhythm of nature. A curious fragment of rural belief drifts into your awareness. Some farm workers pay close attention to the behavior of animals at dusk, believing that restless movement might signal an early frost or a shift in weather. You glance toward a group of sheep huddled near a fence, their quiet stillness offering no clear message. Yet the act of observing them feels like participation in an ancient conversation between humans and landscape. Scholars still debate whether industrialization gradually diminishes the importance of seasonal awareness in urban areas or merely transforms how people experience its effects. Standing here on open ground, you sense how deeply the turning year continues to influence everyday existence. Winter promises both hardship and communal warmth. Summer offers light-filled evenings that stretch labour into later hours. Each season brings its own expectation, shaping not only work, but also emotional outlook. You follow the path toward a small cottage where smoke rises in a thin, steady ribbon. Inside, figures move about, preparing tools for the morning. Their gestures suggest both fatigue and quiet determination. A commonly recognized historical fact settles gently into your thoughts. Agricultural communities often rely on shared effort during peak periods such as planting and harvest, strengthening social ties while also testing endurance. Clouds drift aside, revealing a clear scatter of stars that seem closer in the countryside than in crowded streets. You tilt your head back to watch them, feeling the vastness of the sky expand your awareness of time. Generations have stood in fields like this, measuring life not by years alone, but by cycles of growth and rest. A small superstition from the era surfaces in your mind. Some believe that counting the first stars to appear each evening ensures a favourable season ahead. You attempt the ritual half in jest, losing track as more lights emerge. The wind carries distant sounds of a cart rumbling along a country lane. Its steady rhythm blends with the soft murmur of insects hidden in grass. You realise how natural environments offer a different kind of companionship than urban streets. Here silence is rarely empty. It hums with subtle movement and promise. As the night deepens, the chill becomes more pronounced. You pull your coat closer, reflecting on how seasonal change influences even the simplest decisions about clothing, shelter, and daily routine. The awareness of weather's power feels humbling, reminding you that ordinary lives often depend on forces beyond human control. You turn back toward the faint glow of town lights on the horizon. Behind you, fields rest beneath the watchful sky. Ahead, the final hours of this journey wait quietly. You walk on with a renewed sense of how time's passage reveals itself not only in calendars, but in shifting winds, ripening crops, and the shared endurance of those who move in harmony with the turning year. You walk slowly now, guided by the distant shimmer of town lights that seem softer than before, as though the night itself has grown contemplative. The path beneath your boots feels familiar after so many quiet observations. Each sound carries greater meaning. The faint rustle of leaves, the gentle creak of a gate stirred by wind, the far-off murmur of a late returning carriage. You sense that the day has reached its natural conclusion, not with drama, but with a gradual settling into stillness. Crossing back into the town's outer streets, you notice how windows darken one by one, their earlier warmth replaced by calm shadow. A modest glow remains in a few homes where families prepare for rest. A widely acknowledged historical insight rises gently within you. In 19th century Britain, the close of day often unfolds through predictable rituals shaped by both necessity and comfort with sleep, regarded as essential preparation for another cycle of labour and social responsibility. You pause near a small garden where night flowers release a faint, sweet fragrance. Their pale petals catch the moonlight in the delicate reflections. A curious belief from the era drifts into your thoughts. Some people consider it fortunate to notice blossoms opening after dusk, interpreting the sight as a reminder that renewal continues even in the darkness. You watch quietly, feeling a subtle sense of reassurance that life persists in rhythms beyond conscious awareness. Scholars still debate whether the repetitive structure of daily routine fosters resilience among ordinary individuals or gradually narrows their sense of possibility. Standing here beneath a wide sky, you sense how both interpretations intertwine. Familiar patterns offer stability, yet each person carries private hopes that stretch beyond the boundaries of habit. The quiet streets seem to hold these unspoken dreams like secrets shared only with the night. You continue towards the centre of town where a clock tower stands in dignified silhouette. Its hands mark the hour with measured certainty, echoing softly across empty lanes. A commonly noted historical fact settles into your awareness. Public timekeeping devices become increasingly significant during this century, helping coordinate work schedules and social events in communities shaped by industrial change. You feel the gentle authority of that rhythm guiding even your own steps. A stray cat crosses your path with silent grace, pausing to glance at you before slipping into shadow. Such small encounters feel strangely symbolic now, reminders that countless lives intersect briefly before continuing on separate journeys. The lamplighter you noticed earlier extinguishes one of the final flames, leaving a stretch of street bathed only in starlight. Darkness arrives not as an ending, but as a soft invitation to rest. You reach a quiet square where benches sit empty beneath the branches of an old tree. Its leaves stir in a light breeze, whispering fragments of stories you have gathered throughout the day. Memories surface like reflections on water. The early morning chill, the rhythm of looms, children's laughter echoing in narrow courtyards. The steady rise and fall of waves along the shore. Each image blends into a larger understanding of how ordinary lives unfold through countless small moments. You sit for a while, letting your thoughts slow to match the hush around you. The town no longer feels unfamiliar. Instead, it seems to breathe in harmony with your own quiet reflections. You realize that history is rarely shaped by dramatic events alone. More often it grows through daily acts of endurance, kindness, and adaptation that pass almost unnoticed at the time. Gradually you rise and begin the final walk toward a place of rest. A faint glow appears in a window ahead, promising warmth and the gentle comfort of sleep. Your steps grow lighter as fatigue gives way to peaceful anticipation. The journey that began with dawn's hesitant light now concludes beneath a sky filled with patient stars. You enter the room and settle onto a simple bed where blankets hold the lingering scent of fresh linen. The world outside fades into distant murmurs. Your breathing slows, thoughts soften. The memories of this long day drift through your mind like leaves carried by a quiet stream. Let the pace of your imagination slow even further now. Picture the town resting in layered silence, smoke thinning above rooftops, waves retreating along the shore, fields stretching beneath the moon's calm watch. You are safe within this gentle stillness, part of a rhythm that has guided countless lives before your own. Allow your muscles to loosen, your eyelids to grow heavy. There is nothing left to accomplish tonight. The stories you have gathered will remain with you, settling into the soft spaces between dreams. In this tranquil moment, time itself seems to pause, offering reassurance that ordinary days, however demanding, always lead eventually to rest. Sleep comes gradually like a tide rising without hurry. You drift toward it with quiet acceptance, carried by the knowledge that tomorrow will unfold in its own patient way. The night holds you gently. The past fades into a comforting hush. All that remains is calm, steady breathing, and the peaceful certainty that you can let go. Sweet dreams.